everyone. So we're here in our Books Alive week talking about different experiences of stigma and discrimination. And my name's Carolyn Barber from the Good Mental Health Cooperative. And I'd like to introduce Dave, who is one of our Books Alive volunteers. You've been with the project quite a while, Dave, haven't you?
Yeah.
And Dave is going to talk about his book, which is Bipolar Disorder. So, Dave, if I could just start with asking you about, why have you chosen this particular book title?
Well, because it's accurate. So can you see the picture? Yep.
Yeah, fine, yes.
Okay, so this is age going along, and then various ups and downs during my lifetime. So the high ones, the big M's, are elation, happiness, optimism, high energy, racing thoughts. Sometimes your thoughts race so much you lose touch with reality. And the lows are depression, which is a more common experience. So low mood, low energy, pessimism, lack of motivation, sense of dragging, and your thoughts go very slowly, and it's not a nice place to be. You can enjoy a good high as long as it doesn't go too high, but depression, never enjoyable.
And is that, so that's your different ages, isn't it? So
that's right.
20, 30, 40. Yeah. Okay. So your first high episode was in your early 20s then, was it?
Mid-20s,
Right.
fell in love, and all too much. Within 2 weeks, I was so excited. I was sectioned, padded cell, lots of drugs, and yeah.
And had you ever experienced anything like that before?
No, out of the blue. I mean, then on reflection, I thought back that first low is my first term at university, where I struggled. And looking back, I was probably a bit depressed, but nothing too serious. But no, nothing came right out of the blue.
And the red lines you've put in as significant events. So do you feel that the significant events relate to what's happened in terms of highs and lows?
To some extent. I mean, the first significant event was when I lost my job, which I've been with the same organization 20 years. And that was actually good because it took a lot of pressure off. So I've been having annual depressions, and that ended. Then the second significant event was moving here to Portsmouth, where the mental health services didn't know me. Right. So they weren't so good at treating my depression. And then the most recent significant event is our grandson being born. Okay. And the depression is just by the by for that one. And it wasn't a very serious one.
Okay.
I think probably a lot of energy expended in the excitement. And so that needs some recovering from. It's a bit like a bank account. If you overspend, you go into the red.
Right.
So if you overspend too much energy, you have to have a catch up. So yeah.
And I can see, so there's a significant event there about when you moved to Portsmouth. So you were about 50 then.
Yeah.
And there's quite a significant high after that. Does that link in your? You kind of suggested that the mental health services didn't know you here. Was that linked? Do you think?
What linked was the fact that I was followed by my worst depression.
Right.
Because they were very reluctant to treat my depression. So I was sectioned for my high. So they'd seen me, maybe not at my worst, but near enough. And then within a month or two, I was back in with depression. But I don't manifest externally particularly as depressed. So they were struggling to accept that I was depressed, and so they wouldn't treat it. And the consequences were, I was in for 3 weeks, they kicked me out. I went back in for another 3 weeks or so, they kicked me out again. So then I made a suicide attempt because I was so desperate.
Right.
And after that, they asked me if I wanted to go in again. The implication being, do you want to go home and do it again? To have another go. I mean, it was really very strange.
Right.
But they took me back in and began to treat it seriously as depression.
Right.
Still took an awful long, took months to recover from.
Right.
But so that was, that answers question 2 as well as the first one, referring to our crib sheet.
So yeah, okay. So just into, I mean, it's interesting. It is interesting to see the graph. I know I've seen it before, but not for a long time. So it's interesting just to see how this kind of how patterns make sense, in
Yes.
terms of what's happening. So what do you think what have you learned about all this through all your experiences of this kind of disorder?
I mean, the biggest learning point is you cannot trust your thinking.
Right. Yeah. Which actually is a learning point for all of us.
Yeah, I mean, most people go through life assuming that what goes on in their head corresponds to reality.
Yes. Yeah.
And I know that sometimes what goes on in my head jolly well doesn't correspond to reality. Yeah. Because I come down to earth with a bump afterwards.
Yeah.
And but yeah, I think that's right for everyone. You can't take your rationality for granted.
Yes.
We can all be wrong, sometimes spectacularly.
Yeah.
So,
and I guess for all of us, our thoughts do play all sorts of tricks on us, don't they? Normally.
Yeah, 3 people witness a traffic accident and they'll all tell you different things.
Exactly. Yeah. 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 So what would you say has kind of what's got you through the really difficult times with this? So obviously you had a really bad experience after you moved to Portsmouth, and that went on for some time.
Yes.
What got you through?
I mean, the first thing that's got me through is that the girl I fell in love with has been married to me for 36 years now, near enough, next week. So, having that stability and that support,
yes.
particularly as she is very stable herself. And then in 2012, both my sons were old enough for the first time really to give substantial support themselves.
Right.
My younger son was in his final term or so, and he came away from university to give support. In fact, was with me in some of my extreme anxiety in the hospital, and from which he went home in tears, because there's nothing you can do if someone is beside themselves with anxiety.
Yeah.
To the extent, the nurses just ignored me. It's very weird. They put you in the psychiatric hospital and they don't talk to you. I mean, anyway, yeah. So supportive family, supportive church. Once I was well again, our pastor put me up the front and interviewed me.
Right.
And I had a queue afterwards.
Right.
So we don't play pretend. We actually address it head on and see mental health as as an issue that people struggle with and need support with.
Yeah. Well, it's a human health issue, isn't it?
It is. I mean, 1 in 4 people or whatever they think. So, church of getting on for 200. Obviously, we've got quite a lot of us.
Yes.
And then I was part of a bipolar group, which the health trust put on. I was skeptical. It was a 16-week course, but it was excellent, actually. Each of us shared our story within 16 weeks. They gave us some practical input as well. I mean, the most useful thing for me was the description of bipolar disorder as a broken thermostat in your house.
Right.
So that, you know, as the temperature falls, it doesn't kick in and put the radiators on.
Right.
And the opposite as well, you know, as the temperature goes up and up and up, it doesn't turn the radiators off until the house catches fire. I mean, you know, so
there's some sort of like a regulation missing.
That's right.
Okay. Yeah.
So it doesn't keep your moods within the usual limits.
Yeah.
So I think that's a helpful model.
Yeah. And who put on that course, did you say?
It was in Eastney Health Centre, so it was a local, the local mental health trust, I think.
Okay, all right. So I mean, I think courses about mental health and different conditions seem to be really helpful, don't they? You know, I've had lots of good feedback from people who've done about.
I mean, if they're done well, I think you know, it's the mixture of the kind of information about the condition plus the lived experience, having both together.
Yeah.
And it, you know, we became quite a supportive environment. I mean, you know, it's got to be a high trust environment. Yeah. I mean, it didn't go on, you know, the sport didn't go on afterwards, but in a sense, for those 16 weeks or whatever it was, it was very, very good.
Okay. So, what would you say to someone who was going through a similar kind of experience, or maybe like just thinking back to your first episodes, you know, which must have been really scary in lots of ways. Well, as part of it, what would you say to someone going through that?
This is where I feel that I'm here under false pretenses, because, you know, it's meant to be about stigma. I've never experienced stigma.
Right. No, you've been very fortunate, I think. Yeah.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, you know, from coming to my senses in hospital and Sue being around to explain to me what had happened to me.
Yeah.
And then for my parents to visit and Sue to explain to my parents what had happened to me. And then we're at Bible College. Principal was a medical doctor, so the community knew what had happened to me. I went back into that environment. And then, so that, I mean, accepting it, I think, is the first thing. I think if you fight it, no, but that's really tough to do. Accepting treatment and trusting doctors, but again, that's hard to do. I mean, I worked with doctors. I managed a general practice, so, you know, I'm used to relating to doctors. And whatever support you can find. I mean, it was really tragic when I was in St James's, because there were so many people in there who were unsupported. They found it very odd that I was supported. which seemed strange. I mean, Sue came into the case conferences and so on. But the staff seemed to find it more of a threat than anything else.
Right. It sounds as well. So you've had, you know, you've been fortunate to have your close family support, but also you've had more acceptance, it sounds, from your wider social networks. You know, like you described about the church, and, you know, people actually taking it on and saying, you know, we not just going, oh, they're there, you know, we won't talk about it anymore, but actually opening up the discussions. And
they've always talked about it. We've always been very open with our sons. I mean, you know, it's an appropriate level. So growing up when they were small, if I was depressed, I would hide in my bedroom and, you know, Sue would explain to them, you haven't done anything wrong, Dad is not very well. They did enjoy it when I was a bit more on the manic side, because I then was able to give them, I was operating at their kind of level then. So.
Okay. All right. So is there anything else that you want to kind of add about your experience, or?
I mean, The only other thing is I have one of these tattoos.
All right. Yeah.
Um, which is the semicolon, which means the sentence hasn't come to an end.
Right.
So it's not the end. It's not the end. Having a mental health issue is not the end of your life.
No.
You can live with the condition.
Yes.
So it's having that sense of hope.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's something about the sort of acceptance, in a way, in yourself and with others, that means that you can, get on with all kinds of other aspects of your life, can't you? It doesn't. Yeah, you're right.
And I mean, I don't think you gain by pretending it's not there, right? Yeah. So I tend to be quite open about it.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Dave. That's been really interesting, and it's good to see you as ever. So
thanks.
So we'll bring it to a close, and see you soon.
Okay. Thanks, Carolyn.
Okay. Bye.